And welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by the man who secretly controls the FIFA World Rankings. It's Taylor Rockwell. It's you all along, isn't it?
It is indeed. I just want to keep Bruce Arena hungry. That's why I dropped the USA 12 spots.
So a lot of people very upset that the new FIFA rankings are announced. USA has dropped 12 spots to 35th in the world.
Yep.
And a lot of people ask why, and I have the answer. It's Taylor Rockwell. He just does it from his house.
I do. I like to keep everybody, guessing. Nobody can feel too confident. I like to put some teams that probably don't belong in the top 20 just to make everybody's heads explode. And then I like to make sure the United States stay confidently ahead of Australia so that we at least win the former British colonies rankings award.
Are they still top of former British colonies?
They might be, although I guess it depends on what you call a British colony. And since I don't want to touch that.
Does England count?
Well, there's some other countries in there that I'm not going to name because it makes me uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yep.
So obviously you do not secretly control the FIFA ranking.
Cough, Ireland, cough.
There is actually a formula for how this works, and it's more. I think the problem is that people just don't understand what it is, right? And it's basically it stretches back a few years, and you get points for what you've done over the past few years. And as the window of what is involved moves forward, your points from the past drop off,
right?
And that's why the US moves down the rankings, right? This will be results from a few years ago. It's not because someone at FIFA looked at the US and was like, I'm not sure about this Paul Areola. Down you go 12 places, right? That's not how it is.
No, and it's also weighted, I think, based on international performance in major recognized competitions.
Yeah.
Which is why a bunch of African teams have jumped a few spots.
Yes, because they played some qualifiers, right?
Or because they had the African Cup of Nations, which is a major tournament that's already happened. If these rankings came out after the Gold Cup, maybe some rankings change.
That is it, right? Because the Gold Cup is a little later in the summer, the US misses out on that stuff. And also on these the points that we were were keeping us up, they were World Cup qualifiers from way back.
Yep.
They're obviously worth big money as well.
Yep.
Big money points.
It is also worth noting here that every time a podcaster based in one of the countries doesn't call it by its proper title, then that country loses a few spots as well. Because it's FIFA, and they want that money. It's the FIFA Coca-Cola World Rankings. Thank you.
Do you think...
Gotta get that soda money.
Great idea. If I'm Pepsi, if I'm in marketing at Pepsi, I would be proposing...
Well, they don't have great ideas in the marketing department at Pepsi, but sure, go ahead.
I'll send this to them. They should do their own football world ranking that's really based on the strength of each team recently, right? They don't have some complicated formula. They just have someone who's a soccer expert or a bunch of a round table of soccer experts who genuinely rank the teams.
The problem with that is that
it's gold. It's fizzy gold.
It is. First of all, when you say that, I think of Banya, so thanks for that. Second of all, the problem is that I already think of them as the second tier in the soda wars. Yeah. I apologize. I know we've heard before. I know some of you like a Pepsi. That's fine. Yeah, you're allowed to like a Pepsi.
So some people, when they ask, is Pepsi okay, they say, I prefer it.
My wife said no the other day. She shut that down. She shut that down. No. She was just no, I don't want Pepsi. I'm good. Thank you.
Come on, Margaret. It's not that different.
And then she apologized, to which the woman responded, oh, no, I get it, which I did enjoy. But all my jokes then lead to is it the Pepsi rankings are the second tier teams in the world?
But this is the point. It would be the best version of the rankings. So therefore, Pepsi would leap over Coca-Cola.
Oh, I see.
So what would you want? We would do like Germany did at Confederations Cup. The Pepsi rankings would be the B squad rankings.
Exactly.
Germany would be top. Let's go with that.
Yeah, no matter what, Germany are top. And they are, right now, top 5 are Germany, Brazil, Argentina, Portugal. Do you know the number 5 team? Remember when I said there's teams that probably don't believe in there?
Switzerland.
Belong in there? Yeah. Switzerland, Poland, Chile, Colombia, France, Belgium. There's your top 10.
Did you say England?
I did not, strangely enough.
Where England?
Where do you think England are?
I would have thought top 10, but I guess not.
13th. Again, that's Spain 11, Italy 12, Peru 14th. So there you go.
Wow, Peru.
Mexico 16. Hooray, CONCACAF. That's our first entrant, I believe.
That's more Confederations Cup points, right?
Yep.
They got to the semis. Okay, let's talk Gold Cup.
Let's do.
Today. It starts for the US. It starts on Saturday with the first Gold Cup group stage game against Panama. I'm going to make the case, Taylor. I knew you'd do it. I'm going to make the case. This is a reasonably big game because Martinique, Nicaragua are our other two group opponents. Panama, by far the biggest team in the group. Not only that, they're also one of the most successful teams in the Gold Cup. Right?
Should I run through it real fast?
Can I try top of my head first?
Sure. Let's start with 2005.
They've made the last 3 or 4 semi-finals.
That doesn't count. This is not trying off the top of
You're
your
going to
head.
list every Gold Cup since 2005?
2005, lost in the final to the United States. 2007, lost in the quarterfinal. 2009, lost in the quarterfinal, both of those to the United States. 2011, lost in the semifinals to the United States. The final in 2013, lost to the USA, and then beat the USA on penalties in the third place game in 2015.
So they are there or thereabouts all the time, and they probably would like to beat the United States because of Graham Zusi.
Yeah, well, and because of Graham Zusi, and also, as I just said, in every tournament except the last one, it was a loss to the United States that put them out, or at least knocked them out of some sort of medal.
So do you... Did you say metal or medal?
Medal, because I think there was they did have a chance to get the 4th place. I think they lost on in like the 4th place game in one of those competitions as well.
So do you think there's maybe a thing in Panama? We're kind of projecting it, but is there a thing in Panama of like, this is the team we need to beat if we're going to sort of get over this United States Gold Cup hump?
I mean, I think it's probably always USA and Mexico are the two that they would like to beat. And I think for any number of reasons, it's the United States that would be the more celebrated of the two.
Okay, so we saw the USA play Ghana.
We did.
And we were impressed with what we saw. We liked it. I'm not sure whether Ghana or Panama are the stronger team, but I'm going to say it's kind of a similar test. Should we at least go that far?
Yes and no, in the sense that I think that like Ghana's B/C team is a very exciting team, but it's also a young team that were trying to prove themselves a little bit, and with that comes maybe some untested players in some untested positions, and so that back line and the defense was a little bit vulnerable, and they were a little bit more open, I think, than I expect Panama to be in this game.
That's a good point. Yeah, Panama will be a bit more defensive, we think.
That would be my guess, yeah.
All right, so we take a quick look at Panama's roster before we get onto what we'd like to see the United States do in this game.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the names you know, maybe Blas
I can't wait to see Blas Perez play. Roman Torres as well. He's going to be great. Jaime Pinedo also in there.
So yeah, Jaime Pinedo, the usual goalkeeper. Roman Torres, the Seattle centre-back. Blas Perez, not there. Felipe Beloy was a name I recognised from back in the day.
Yeah, not there as well.
March also not there. And from what I understand, the coach, Gomez, has basically decided not to go with the B roster, but to get rid of some of the old guys, essentially, and give some young guys a chance. Guys who are in their like 22, 23, 24 stage, right? They're not teenagers, but they're sort of at the beginnings of their international career. Yeah. And he's really gone for it with this roster.
It's a well-blended roster because if you look at it, you do have like the veterans in some of those spots are players who are like you do have like Gabriel Gomez, who's 33, who has what,
defensive midfielder, right?
Looking at 132 caps. But outside of that, you've got a lot of like 27, 29-year-olds. Then you've got that blend with like 23 and 21-year-olds. So it's a good combination of experimentation mixed with veteran know-how, mixed with... What's the difference between like veteran and newbie? But sort of like, I know what I'm doing, but I'm still trying to prove myself. There's like another level in there as well. So it's a very well blended team.
There we go. Yes,
the short way of saying that.
Okay, so do you want to talk about some of the players that we should be on the lookout for?
Sure.
Players to be worried about, maybe.
I already mentioned one Gabriel, but I'm going to go with a different Gabriel. It's the man up top.
Yeah.
We're expecting that Panama will either play 4-4-2 in some games. My guess is that against the United States, it will probably be a little bit more compact, as I said, so probably more of a 4-5-1.
Okay.
And I think that leaves Gabi Torres as the main striker up top for Panama.
He's definitely the most senior of all the guys selected, so it would make sense. Because for Panama, obviously, we're the big game in the group, right? To go Gabi Torres up front. So all I know about Gabi Torres, used to play for Colorado Rapids. I know that. I know that they made him a DP, so he's sort of ranked highly within the United States.
He plays in Switzerland, which is why Switzerland are in the top 5, I'm pretty sure. That's it right there. Lausanne Sport.
Here's some actual facts. He's pretty fast.
I mean, hurtful that you would impugn my factory.
And he likes to toy with the offside trap. He will toe that line. He'll probably be caught offside, but it also means that US centre-backs will have to be wary of keeping that line straight. No stragglers. No stragglers on the offside line, or Gabi Torres will be in on goal.
All right. I am actually making notes as we talk because I think like points that you're making here will factor into conversations we have later. For example, we don't want a backline that's straggling, so who features who's the most likely to feature that will help you not straggle? Yeah, who's the least straggly? Yes. Again, well said, Daryl Grove. So I mentioned Torres. Who are you concerned about from a U.S. perspective?
Actually, there's one guy, this is going to sound weird, that I saw some YouTube of, and he's one of the new guys that's been added.
YouTube never lies.
His name is Ricardo Clark. So not that Ricardo Clark. It's spelled the same,
for Houston,
with an extra E on the end. To the point, if you go to his Wikipedia page, Ricardo Clark, the Panamanian, they say not to be confused with Ricardo Clark of 2010 World Cup fame.
If you go to Wikipedia and you do Ricardo Clark, do you get the do you have to click the disambiguation page or whatever that is?
No, there's no disambiguation because the spelling's slightly different, but it's close enough that they say not to be confused with. Just in case you were very confused about Ricardo Clark doing a Benjamin Button and getting 10 years younger and suddenly playing for Panama.
Yeah. So first of all, that was a joke. Houston, that was a different Ricardo Clark. Second of all, why were you watching YouTube video of Mr. Clark?
Because I just saw him mentioned as a guy who was like, this is the guy they've sort of brought in as a new attacking option, right? So they obviously think he's worth a look. And so I got a good look at his YouTube. Very fast. Very long legs. You know how some players are fast and it's like little legs moving very quickly? Ricardo Clark, he's not huge, right? I think he's 5'11", so it's not like he's 6'4" or something. But he's got very long legs. So you see his gigantic strides that he takes as he's sort of powering his way down the field. And he also does that thing. I feel like I get accused of doing this a little bit. Like when you've got...
Backheeling when you don't need to?
No, also that. But when you've got longer legs than the rest of your body in some way, people don't expect you to get to certain balls, but you almost like extend your leg and get there.
You do that. I will be honest.
Right?
Yes, I've seen you do that before.
Yeah, it's the desperate. As you go past me, that's my last move is to just see how far my leg will reach to try and poke the ball away. But he seems to like pull balls out of the air and pull balls like that look like miss-hit passes. He'll get there and pull it in, and he is not afraid to shoot. I've seen some YouTube footage of him banging some goals in. So keep a lookout for Ricardo Clark with an E.
And so where do you think he will feature for Panama?
So he's a striker / right winger. So my guess is in the 4-5-1, if that's what they go with, he'll be a winger who will do the defensive job but will then join the attack. I'm assuming that he might start.
Right. And so the thing with Panama is that it does feel like you can kind of take a pretty good guess at most of their starters, but then it does factor into it if it is the 4-4-2 or the 4-5-1. 4-4-2, it's maybe a little bit more predictable. 4-5-1, there is a little bit moving players around.
Yeah.
So, for example, our friends over at Stars and Stripes FC, you sent me their preview, which I enjoyed very much.
Alex Showell, who really did show well with this preview.
Very nicely done. But he had Valentin Pimentel, I think, starting on the right if it is that 4-5-1. And I think they were basically like, there's not much to be said about him other than that we think he's good at crossing, so he'll start on the right wing.
And I will say, I want to give shout out to Alex Showell for the honesty in writing that. Not pretending to be a Pimentel expert, just saying, like, I don't know that much, but here's what I'm guessing is going to happen.
Because we've talked about this before, but it is easy to write those previews in such a way that you're like, if you read them with any, like, if you're just reading them as a cursory, like, oh, I want to know some names, then you'll be fine. But if you stop and really think about it, because you end up getting that language of, Pimentel isn't a usual starter, but he's been included on this roster as an experimentation to see what he can offer going forward. So he'll definitely be looking to get out there and prove himself and prove that he belongs.
Yeah, that's a lot of words, but you haven't really said much, right?
Sure haven't.
So salute to Alex Showell at Stars and Stripes FC.
Yes.
Guys, I'm also looking for our, I'll have to look up his name here, because he was listed alongside Ricardo Clark as one of the younger strikers. Abdiel Arroyo might be another one who is a winger and a forward, so he may start on the wing. But the guy that you'll be most familiar with, there's a guy we've seen before who made this roster, Edgar Barcenas. Or Barcenas. Sorry, there's no tilde. We went over this.
We did. Also, good pronunciation of tilde. Well done.
So, thank you. So here's what I know about him. Dribbly and quick. And so if he plays on the left wing, then that really is a test for whomever our right back is.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll add that one to the list of things to talk about later on. Here's the thing. So you said that was the name that I would be like people would be most familiar with. I would say that there are two other names on there that people are probably slightly more familiar with.
Who'd that be then?
That would be Annabelle Godoy and Armando Cooper.
Yes.
Because I think we know them both from Panama games past and also Major League Soccer.
Yeah, and San Jose Highlights is where I know Annabelle Godoy.
There we go. So we're thinking that Godoy maybe starts in the center of the midfield. If they do go with that 5-man midfield, probably with Cooper in there as well.
Here's how I see it. If they go 5-man midfield, it's 3 central midfielders.
Yep.
It's Gomez as the most defensive midfielder, Gabriel Gomez. He was the guy you mentioned earlier with 130-something caps, right? Godoy as also a defensive midfielder, but who will then power forward. And then Armando Cooper as someone who will run and run and run, and is also, when he gets the ball, can like dribble and attack you. So that's a really good like combination of 3 different midfielders, right? Yeah. The alternative is I know Cooper can play on the wing, because I've seen him play on the wing. So they could go like basically a 4-4-2 with the same personnel, but then you just switch Cooper out wide.
Yes.
So that'll be the key to when you see the lineup.
It will. But I think the based on what we've seen in the past from Panama, especially in Gold Cups, and what I guess we would do if we were in charge, is that if you look at the other teams in this group in Nicaragua and Martinique, not going to be the toughest of opposition. I mean, obviously they've got some talent, but still.
We're going to look real silly when they finish 1 and 2 in this group.
You never know. But I think if you're Panama, you recognize that you have better chances of getting wins and positive results against those two than you do against the United States. So you probably bunker a bit more, play a bit more defensive, maybe hope for that draw, maybe hope to like get the goal on the counter and then sit back a little bit. You probably don't go out and attack the United States from the opening.
Yes.
So I think
don't open it up too much.
I think this will be a more conservative Panama team than you're likely to see against Nicaragua and Martinique.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then before we move on to the US, which I feel like we're about to do, it's in the air. I think it's worth thinking about what happened when the US played Panama in the World Cup qualifier away in, I want to say, Panama City back in March. So remember, we smashed Honduras 6-0 at home.
I remember this.
Then we went away to Panama for Bruce Arena's second World Cup qualifier, and it was a 1-1 draw, and it was a very dull game. Like, I think it was hot and humid, but like both teams played 4-4-2. Neither really pressed or went for it, and the game really kind of just fizzled out 1-1. Very unimpressive performance from the United States. Easily, I'd say Bruce Arena's worst game.
So far? Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know, because I think like you could argue some of those friendlies haven't been so captivating,
right.
But those are friendlies. I think it's
important.
definitely his most disappointing from like not necessarily from a results standpoint, but from what you saw on the field standpoint. In terms of competitive fixtures.
So the reason I find that interesting is just is almost we get like a redo. It's not with the same personnel, obviously, but you get a redo at that. And what I'm hoping to see when we think about this United States team is to not be as sort of damp squibbish as we were in that game. And the interesting thing to me about that is the biggest complaint was the Bradley Jones midfield partnership. Neither of those guys are on this roster for this game.
So it sounds like we're about to pivot to the U.S. roster, to the U.S. approach, maybe the U.S. lineup, and some things we expect to see. But before we do that, should we discuss our sponsor for today's show?
Yeah, let's. Okay, so today's show is sponsored by Wohven, one of our new sponsors. Wohven are the guys that make the T-shirts that are designed by a designer they partner with. You sign up $11 a month or $15 a month for the design T-shirt, and they ship it to you once a month, and it's a surprise. You don't know what the design is going to be until it arrives, and that's part of the fun. And I will, looking at past designs, I can almost guarantee you will give the designs a thumbs up.
It won over my former colleague at the record store, and he's a hipster record store worker. So there's that.
Jack Black?
No, not Jack Black, but slightly less loud, but equally opinionated. But no, he saw I was in there the other day, and he saw my shirt, and he was like, "Oh, I like that shirt. Is that like one of those like designer shirts that's really expensive?" And I was like, "No, it was very reasonable. It was they sponsored the show. It was delivered to my door." And he was like, "Oh, what is it? Like some mass produced? Like they just like do a graphic from somebody else and then publish like print it a million times?" And I was like, "No, it's a designer they work with." And he was like, "Wow, well, that's pretty cool then." Okay, all right. So Wohven are good enough to win over the cynical record store employee. That's all I'm saying.
So this is like if someone walked into the record store in High Fidelity and talked to Jack Black and impressed him, and everyone was like, "Whoa."
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't usually happen.
Or at least like calmed him into just sort of like, "Yeah, okay, that's fine." Like that's not really his like character personality. So to get him into that point, it means you've kind of won a little bit. Yeah, I think so.
All right, and the key thing for me in that exchange is that he thought it was an expensive T-shirt, but it was actually $15, and that is because of the business model, right? Yeah. They work with the designer, they print the T-shirts, and they know how many subscribers they have, and then they can send out the exact amount. So all those like business costs, overhead. There's no T-shirts like left in a warehouse, right? So that's why they're able to do it at such a great price. And you can make the price even greater, which is definitely a word, by using the Total Soccer Show discount code TSS2017, TSS2017. You'll get 25% off the cost of your first T-shirt. That's at woven.com, WOHVEN.com. Discount code is TSS2017. And if you didn't catch all that information, where are you going to put it for people, Taylor?
I believe, if past is precedent, it will be in the show notes.
That's a good place. That's where I would put it too.
And also tattooed on your forehead. If you're a real fan of Woven, Daryl, you would do this.
That would be a big sponsorship package.
Yeah. All right, we'll go neck. We'll go neck tattoo for Daryl. Yeah.
Daryl will tattoo your URL on his forehead.
Yeah. All right, cool. I'm glad we've agreed. Beautiful. I'm sure Woven will be happy with that. I'm not sure they will be, actually.
That's the next NASCAR sponsorship.
Yep.
Or the next soccer sponsorship.
Could be.
That could be Premier League. Could be. You could get this on Wayne Rooney's forehead.
I've just realized that, like, you're probably right. I feel like that is a thing that's going to happen. Like,
tattooed sponsorships.
I really like wasn't it? Isn't
We'll
it?
live to see it.
Doesn't Vargas have like the Air Jordan?
Yeah.
Like I think.
But I'm not sure that's a paid arrangement. That's like.
And I actually think he's gotten a larger tattoo over that since then. I could be wrong on that one. Maybe that was Ihara. I forget who has that one on the Chilean national team.
Is it LeBron James? Did he get LeBron James over the top?
that could be.
He watched a lot of midday Fox Sports and just got caught up in the debate.
But we yes. But we also are like, first of all, that's good stuff, Daryl. That's just good stuff. Because somehow Colin Cowherd is always on our television whenever we turn it on. Regardless of what channel, he's just there. Like Home Shopping Network, CNN.
Yep.
It could
and
be
that's
anywhere,
what he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. Always. But like, really, I mean, I could absolutely see that. I could see a Ricky Bobby-esque soccer player getting like Fig Newtons tattooed on their forearm, and then when they score, they just like hold up Fig Newtons. Every time I score, I get $1,000.
Well, Jordan Morris is advertising type 1 diabetes.
I know.
He's got that T1D tattoo on
There
his
we go.
arm.
And Kellen Rowe is advertising Seattle. I believe
Yes,
we
he is.
established that after the Ghana game. All that is
Okay.
to say, thank you to Wohven for sponsoring today's show.
Yes, link is in the show notes
Mm-hmm.
as well as the discount code. And we really do love the product, so yeah, check it out.
That we do. We
So
also
let's-
really do love the United States, so let's
Yes,
talk
we
about
do.
them.
So I was just saying, before we pivoted to advertising, we're going to pivot back
Mm-hmm.
to the double pivots in the United States midfield.
Mm-hmm.
Bradley and Jones did not work against Panama in that away World Cup qualifier.
Mm-hmm.
The last 15 minutes, Kellen Acosta comes in for Jermaine Jones, and that looks like the future.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Bradley rested at least for the group stage of the Gold Cup. Dax McCarty is his replacement. That looks like being our central midfield, right? It worked
Mm-hmm.
great against Ghana. Go back to our review to hear about that. Do we want to see that again?
Yep, absolutely.
There's no question, right?
Next question?
It has to be, yeah. So here's
Yep.
the why I'm so confident about this is like I wanted to see, for example, Christian Roldan.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't play against Ghana, he's not going to play against Panama, the toughest game, right? He's obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking if he's not going to play against Ghana, he's not going to play against Panama. So really, Bruce is going to like roll him out against Martinique or Nicaragua for an easier international debut.
Yeah, and I think we had a lot of questions about who was going to play in that Ghana game and what that might indicate. Is it going to be Bruce Arena trying to get some people ready for the Gold Cup? Is it him testing players that maybe could be in the World Cup consideration? And I think we got our answer, and I think it is that he wants to know who could be on that World Cup squad. And so you look at the players that played against Ghana, and I think all of those guys are players that are in consideration, or maybe
Everybody's in consideration. No one has been caught up and said, doesn't matter how well you play, you're not coming back next summer.
True.
Right?
Well, maybe. But I mean, I think there's a couple people that could maybe play themselves out of contention. I
Yeah,
heard
of course, yeah.
Ziggy Schmidt on Extra Time Radio say there's a chance that...
Oh, he's too old. He'll never make it.
That's true. But he was saying that, maybe out of bitterness then, that this might have been Kenny Saif's one chance to make the World Cup roster. And now that he's out with injury, that it's going to be tough for him basically to get back into consideration because he won't have that many national team games.
We haven't talked about this on TSS. Kenny Saif injured, out. Chris Pontius in, replaces him.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a blow for Kenny Saif. It's also a blow for people like us, maybe, who were excited about the possibility of seeing Kenny Saif and then being like, oh, this is perfect. We can add him to the like possible starters.
But I do think, with all that said, there are sort of tiers to this team. And I think that there are some players who are probably going to the World Cup, like, regardless of what happens in this tournament. I think, like, Brad Guzan, for example, he might not be the starter, but I think he is definitely going to be on that roster. Kellen Acosta is probably the other one.
Guess,
And then, like, if you're looking at this midfield specifically, I think Dax McCarty is on that bubble.
Yes.
And I do think that if he has a very good tournament, then he has definitely... Unless, like, barring injury or barring, like, a horrific turn in form, I think he's booked his spot, and that's why I want to see him starting against Panama.
And also there's this, right? So he is Michael Bradley's backup.
Yeah.
Fair? All right. Michael Bradley's backup is important because if Michael Bradley goes down 20 minutes into the first World Cup game, then he's your key central midfielder for the rest of the tournament.
Yeah.
So it is great to see Dax McCarty play hopefully a whole tournament for the US in the Gold Cup and then have that sort of experience for the United States.
And I'm going to go, and I'm going to go with like a very random reference that could probably be done way faster, but here we go. This is what I'm not about brevity. Do you remember the arc in Louis where he is auditioning to replace Letterman?
Yes. Yeah,
and
then
then
David Lynch is auditioning him.
Yeah, and then I forget the executive, but he says, like, now I got an option. And then basically what he was doing was using Louis C.K. to make David Letterman take a worse deal.
Yep.
I feel
Leverage,
like I feel like that's a little bit what Dax McCarty could do to Michael Bradley, which is just sort of like Bruce Arena could come out of this tournament and say, like, I got options here. Yogi Low had the Confederations Cup. He comes out of that with options for players who maybe could replace some other players.
Okay.
Maybe Dax McCarty. Because before, I mean, you and I would say Michael Bradley, he's first on that list. He's going to the World Cup. He's starting every single game. And I still think
he still is, though.
And I still think he is. But I think that you do have to have that player behind you that's pushing you to the next level.
Yes, true.
If you are so far above everybody else, sometimes that can be because you're an elite player, but sometimes it's because you just don't have people challenging you, or you're resting on your laurels a little bit, and the manager's allowing you to do that. And I think if Dax McCarty and Kellen Acosta continue to look like a very strong combination in that middle, then it's going to make Michael Bradley play that much better and work that much harder to make sure that he still has that spot.
Okay, yes, agreed. So that'd be like a key thing to watch, right, in this game. And if you think about that three-man Panama midfield we mentioned, it's probably going to be Gomez, I've forgotten his name, sorry, Godoy. Yeah, Gomez, Godoy, and Cooper.
Yep.
They're going to go up against McCarty and Acosta, and we think Joe Corona.
I think so.
He played so well in that Ghana game. I can't see him being dropped for someone else to play the attacking midfield role with the creativity he brings, plus the sort of battling qualities he brings. It's kind of the best of both worlds, right? You get the aggression, and you get the technique, and you get the creativity.
And I think the other thing that really sold Joe Corona for me is Herculez Gomez. I enjoyed your interview you did with him earlier today, and his point that for the first 60 or 70 minutes or whatever. Joe Corona was probably the best player on the field from a technical standpoint, at least for the United States. That he could do like the 3 touches where he would settle the ball, take another touch, and then play that ball through and split 2 people, or he could do that 1 touch through traffic, or he could play that 1 touch back and make that firm decision that needed to be made. And it felt like he was playing with a lot of confidence for a guy who hadn't been playing that much for the U.S.
So I look at those 3 now: Corona, Acosta, McCarty, and they've all got aggression. They're all up for a fight. They've all got a really good eye for a pass. Really, all 3 of them have a great eye for a pass, and they've all got really good technique. There's none of those 3 you would be like, oh, he can't trap a ball, or he's that's going to bounce off him, and Godoy's going to charge.
Are there people
in.
on the U.S. team that you'd be like, oh, he can't trap a ball?
Well, there were certain
Let's
players.
Not name names.
There
Never
were
mind.
certain players maybe whose first touch is not so good that we've worried about in the past, right? They can be able to tightly control a ball in midfield in a way that Godoy and Cooper and Gomez can't come in and take it off them. So what I'm saying is I'm confident in that matchup, which is Panama's senior midfield against the US's somewhat junior midfield. So for that reason, it's a great test and a great battle in central midfield if Bruce Arena picks those 3.
Agreed, 100%.
Right.
Also, the reason why I was laughing is because I immediately realized that, yes, there is a player on this team who questioned his first touch.
We both thought this.
And that's why we should just move on.
Let's not go
So we've talked about that center midfield.
Yes.
What about out wide? Because you were the one who I think broached this off air, and I think you're absolutely correct, that is where we might see a little bit of experimentation from Arena.
So, I would argue the Ghana game, Bruce Arena picked his strongest 11, ready for Panama, to give it a run out and see what happens. 4-2-3-1, by the way, is what we're thinking, right? But I'm not sure that the wingers were necessarily his strongest pair, right? Kellen Rowe and Paul Arriola were great in that game. I want to say Arriola for work rate and Kellen Rowe for sort of first-time, almost one-touch passing, really great vision. But I think if that game was a World Cup final with that personnel, Alejandro Bedoya would have started.
Yeah, I think so.
I even think maybe Jesse Zardes would have started because Bruce Arena trusts him so much, right? So the experience of Bedoya and even the experience of Zardes would have won out in a big game. So I'm wondering if against Panama, that same thing happens despite Rowe and Arriola's great performances against Ghana.
I'll say this much. I do think, as I've already said, that Panama are going to be a little bit more compact. They're going to sit back, and you're going to have the technical players, I think, to find the gaps and break them down a little bit. And I don't know if I have as much faith in Paul Arriola. Maybe that's because I don't know him as well, and I've only seen him in limited minutes here and there for the U.S. Then I do say Alejandro Bedoya. So, and then I would also add that in that Ghana game, I was really, really impressed by Kellen Rowe. And again, those kind of those 1-touch passes, but then those 3-touch passes.
And the ability
all of
to
them
spot
impressive.
it when no one else can spot it, and then execute it.
And also, for the Dom Dwyer goal, if you go back and watch that, Kellen Rowe is equally wide open at the far post, and he is. It looks like he's standing there celebrating, but he's actually just standing there with his arms out in the air because he's screaming for the ball because he's wide open. And he, in that situation, managed to outmaneuver a defender and find space, and I think he's also very good at doing that as well.
So, would you be comfortable with, say, Kellen Rowe on the right, Alejandro Bedoya on the left?
I think so, but then we also saw, yes, those 2 starting out wide, but we saw Rowe and Areola switch back and forth on a couple different occasions.
True,
so
yeah.
it could also be Bedoya on the left or Bedoya on the right. Who knows where it will end up.
Could be Jordan Morris.
It could be
right?
as well.
It could be Jordan Morris.
He played
on
that
the
one
wing.
left-footed cross, and therefore he can do anything
But that
with
could have
both
been
feet.
enough to
Yep.
convince everybody. But
It
it's
could
like
be.
some of his. It's like kind of like his at least second most played, if not second favourite position. If he's not playing centre forward, he can play on the left wing and cut inside.
And then we've talked about the midfield a bit. And since you've talked about Jordan Morris, he is an option up top.
Yeah, but he's not Dom Dwyer and he didn't score in his
There it
debut. So it's Dom Dwyer on current form, right?
Yeah.
If it's not Dom Dwyer starting this game, either there's an injury or he's been very poor in training for a week, or Bruce Arena got hit on the head and forgot what happened in the Ghana game.
Yep. Yeah, those
Because
are
it
all.
has to be, right?
Well, I think going back to the Siggy Schmidt interview again, the other point that he made that I thought was particularly interesting was essentially they asked him about Juan Agudelo, and he said, like, yes, he's a very good player, but he's been in and out of this team a lot. He's been in consideration and then dropped and then caught up but not played, and that speaks to like kind of an up and down and not consistent performances. And Bruce Arena, I think, is all about consistency, and it wouldn't make sense to drop the guy who scored in the last game to see what the other guy can do. I think it's basically like Dom Dwyer scored, he worked really hard, he caused problems, I'm going to stick with him and see if he continues to do that. And if he does, then that's great, and if he doesn't, well, then we'll see what happens.
And didn't we also make the argument on the last show that there was a lot of hassling of Ghana's defenders, and the team was almost built that way, like Areola hassling, Corona hassling, even though he's the creative midfielder, and all that starts with Dom Dwyer, right?
Yep.
Dom Dwyer running defenders down, like really the first 30 seconds of both halves of that game, he ran a defender down and one time forced a long ball, the other time fouled someone, right? So that, I mean, what a great CONCACAF player. There's no better stage than the CONCACAF Gold Cup.
I'm excited for this. All
Maybe
right,
away
Dom
to
Dwyer.
Honduras is a better stage.
Although we did have an email, and I forget who it was from, so I apologize. But it was a very good email, and at the end, it was basically making the point that with everything we said about Dom Dwyer and how he's well-suited for CONCACAF, their point was, does that mean that Diego Costa is the ultimate CONCACAF player? And he kind of is, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah, because he's got all the sort of, all the riling defenders, like plus the sort of world-class finishing.
Yep.
Which is not something you say Dom Dwyer's got.
Yeah.
But he's got some finishing.
Give it time. We'll see what happens.
And we may see
what
it.
happens.
We may see it against
We
Panama.
will. So, midfield, we agree upon more or less. Forward, we agree upon more or less.
Yeah, and do we agree on the shape? 4-2-3-1?
Yeah, or something approximating that. 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2, but really a 4-4-1-1. Yeah.
The thing I'd be worried about is it was 4-4-2 away to Panama in March, and that was what kind of didn't work. Like the reason that Acosta-McCarthy thing worked is because they had Corona ahead of them. They almost could form that triangle. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't work then it becomes like an empty bucket midfield. And then we're in a bit of trouble.
I agree with you to some extent that Corona definitely helps with that triangle. But I think the thing we talked about in that Ghana game in the review, a thing that really worked is that you had both McCarty and Acosta dropping deep. I was talking with our friend Patrick Kennedy about this today. And he was like, basically he was saying like, yes, this is what I've been screaming about, because I think he's not the biggest Michael Bradley fan.
Oh, yes,
But
yes.
it's essentially that you saw both McCarty and Acosta dropping in, but then combining. And so it wasn't like Dax gets the ball off the center back and plays it back to the center back, that he would like try to play that one-touch ball into Acosta and then peel off and make a run forward, and they would try to combine in the 1-2s, or then he'd play it to Acosta and Acosta would turn and play it out wide.
You could sort of imagine them slowly just zigzagging passes all the way up the field and into the back of the net, right?
And
that didn't actually happen. But.
And I will say, because, and maybe it's because I don't want to incur the wrath of certain people, but I'll say that maybe Michael Bradley didn't have that midfield support from his midfield partner in the Panama game.
Okay.
And so maybe if he is playing with somebody who isn't Jermaine Jones, then maybe he does have a little bit more like of a person there who knows to drop
for like
in.
20 seconds.
Yeah, whatever. That seemed wimpy. Not to, if you're gonna say things, say things. Yeah. And so I think if you do have him with Acosta, maybe they do function in a similar capacity.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so we've basically laid out our team, except we didn't fully decide on wingers.
Well, yeah, no, but we also haven't talked about defense or goalkeeper.
Okay, should we go back and do that then?
Sure.
Okay, so I'd be okay with the defence that started against Ghana, including goalkeeper, which is Brad Guzan in goal, Graham Zuzi at right back, Jorge Villafana at left back, and then a central defensive pair of Matt Beasley on the left and Matt Hedges on the right of centre back.
And then it seems like I was kind of sad. Like I would like to see Eric Lehigh just because I want to see what he's capable of doing. But again, if we're talking about seeing what people can do on a consistent basis and kind of figuring out some names that could move up on that depth chart, then it seems like maybe you stick with what worked against Ghana, and that is Graham Zusi.
And I'm also thinking if Lehigh was the first choice of these two, he would have played against Ghana.
Yep.
And I think we'll see him against Martinique. That feel right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Villafaña and Morrow, the same. Right?
Yeah.
It's probably going to be Villafaña. The interesting thing for me is that for whoever is at fullback, and I'm assuming it's going to be these two, there will be a test, right? Because if it's Barcenas or if it's Ricardo Clark or pretty much anyone that Panama put out on the wing, Armando Cooper could be, any of those guys will be a test for those fullbacks.
Yep.
So it'll be at least something worth keeping an eye on. Because I was kind of joking that Graham Zusi against Ghana was just playing against a Chicago Fire player.
Yeah.
So there's no new test there.
Yeah.
There's just another MLS player, right?
Yeah.
So if he's up against Barcenas, it's at least something he hasn't seen before.
And it's as I recall, a player that caused him problems in that World Cup qualifier.
Was that Barcenas?
I can't remember if that was the game. We had this conversation before, right? That we couldn't remember which game it was that really made us be like, ooh, this Zusi at right back thing might not work.
It could also have been, I think it's Quintero. He's the other winger who's kind of the senior winger, but he's not on this roster. But we don't know which one.
Sigh of relief there, I guess, for all parties involved except for Quintero.
Yeah. What about centre-backs then? Is it weird that Omar Gonzalez is not an obvious first choice here? Because when this roster was named, you would have gone to him immediately, right? Like, he's the standout of those four centre-backs.
I think so. And I think he was the most veteran, at least in my mind, even though there's a chance that Matt Biesler has more caps than him. I don't know that one off the top of my head. But I think it's probably for the reasons that we were concerned, which is that Omar isn't the best at, like, really picking up this team and, like, making sure that it's all organized and making sure that, like, everybody knows exactly what they're doing. He is more
not an organizer, a leader, not a vocal player.
Yeah, he is more of, like, the reactionary center back who's going to step and make plays, but he's not so good at making sure that everybody is stepping with him. And as we talked about, you don't want stragglers. You need somebody organizing.
I see. This is a callback.
Yeah, and I think that Biesler-Hedges center back partnership looked very organized and looked very disciplined against Ghana. And again, yes, they conceded a goal, but it's off of a really, really well hit free kick by Asamoah Gyan. It's not as though they were shredded through the through the middle countless times. In fact, as we talked about in that review, Ghana did have some chances, but none of them were really, like, clean chances where they were through on goal.
In behind.
Exactly.
And also, didn't we praise that back line for being very together, like no stragglers? They tended to step as a unit and never get, like, pushed back too far. They would move up the field together. And the opposite was true of Ghana, right? The right back was sort of hanging out, like, a little behind everybody that caused them all sorts of trouble. So the US did not do that. So maybe that's a good sign for those four members of the back four.
There we go.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we've solved it. We're good.
The other thing, just in case people ask, the reason I think why it's more likely to be Biesler on the left and then, say, Hedges on the right is that Biesler's left-footed. He's the left centre-back, right? That's why it's John Brooks' left centre-back, Jeff Cameron's right centre-back. Often a back four is put together that way. Left-footed centre-back, right-footed centre-back, left and right.
Yep. You've done it. You've solved it.
Brad Guzan in goal?
Yeah, I think so.
Not everybody will be excited, but I was really impressed with his Ghana performance, and I see no reason for Hamid or Johnson to be picked ahead of him for a big game.
Just needs more tattoos and to start that Howard the Duck podcast that I mentioned on the last show. He's got to get himself more interesting. People need reasons to love Brad Guzan.
Playing for Atlanta might do it for a lot of people.
Definitely might do it. Yes. For some, and maybe not so much for others, but we shall see.
Maybe you'll get super into, like, Atlanta hip-hop.
That could work.
Yeah.
There's plenty to listen to.
Yeah.
They're kind of known for it.
You could start a blog.
Yes. The Brad Guzan hip-hop blog. I would probably read that.
The BGHHB?
It doesn't sound... See, I was going to say, it doesn't sound that far away from the blah, 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 law blog. Whew, got there eventually. Bob Lawball's law blog. There it is.
That's the one. That's the one. I would totally read that.
He's a man who lobs law bombs all the time.
So, this game is Saturday. It's on Fox. Big Fox. We believe it's a 4:30 Eastern kickoff. All right, so US Soccer says it's a 4:30 Eastern kickoff.
We believe US Soccer.
CONCACAF says it's a 4:30 Eastern kickoff. They're normally pretty reliable. If it's like 4:37, they normally say 4:37 on the CONCACAF
and then
website.
Fox says tune in at 2 p.m. to cover it. No, I haven't seen what Fox has said, but it is on, as you said, Big Fox.
Big Fox, so everybody will get a good chance to get a look at this.
Univision as well.
Univision. So we'll do what? Quick take, hot take after the game, and then a bigger review of what we hope will be a United States victory.
Yes. Theoretically, yes, that's the plan.
Actually,
yes.
Before we move out of it, there's one more thing I want to ask you about. What will be a good sign that the US is doing well in this game in the first, let's say, 20 minutes?
I think energetic possession would be what I would go with. And
Similar to what we saw against Ghana.
I would say if you see that like Acosta-McCarty partnership link up early.
Yeah.
And I feel like it will be sort of one of them turning with the ball and then playing it out wide, like into the channel, and finding some gaps that it will start to be maybe pulling Panama out a little bit. That will be one sign. And then I think it will be those fullbacks getting forward and a little bit of overloads. And if you start to see some like designed combination play where you can tell that it's things that the team has been working on in an effort to deal with a Panamanian defense that might be a little bit stacked, then I think it shows that they are executing a game plan.
Yes, I'm all in on that. The one thing I'd add is, as well as the balls out wide from McCarty and Acosta, any sort of risky-looking but ultimately successful balls through the middle that sort of split the lines and find Corona or Dwyer, I think that will be a key to sort of making sure that they're moving the ball forward through the middle, right? That might be the thing I'll be excited to see.
And the other thing that I will be excited to see probably on second viewing, we talked about this again with the Ghana game, was just how good Dom Dwyer is at watching that back line always, and seeing if there's like, oh, that guy is slow to step. Next time I'm going to sit behind the center back and see if he continues to be slow to step, because if so, then I'm going to be onside. Yeah. And it seems like he is not just menacing defenses, but also menacing them without like making contact, but sort of observing from afar and then trying to exploit opportunities.
I would say he did that against Ghana, but the right back made that very easy for him. Right? Rashid Samail.
He just really wanted to make sure that Dom Dwyer had a good debut.
He did, right?
Very generous.
We should check bank records. And we didn't talk about Panama's defense. Sorry, I rolled onto something here, but we didn't talk about Panama's defense because it won't have Torres and Beloy. It will be sort of a less established back four. There may be an opportunity there, especially because, as I understand it, Panama have not played any pre-Gold Cup friendlies. I went looking to see if I could get a look at them, and there weren't any friendlies. So there may be some defensive confusion if we can get at them.
All right.
Okay, then. Once again, Saturday, 4:30 Eastern. It's on Fox.
It is.
All right, shall we move on to the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network?
I suppose we shall.
And I should also mention, while you look for your notes, that...
I don't know what you're talking about.
The gentleman who sent the email about Diego Costa being the ultimate CONCACAF player, David Singletary.
Ah, there it is. Thank you, David, for that email. Thank you for that incredibly accurate point. And also, I knew where my notes were all along, Daryl.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Of course you did.
Hidden under a whole bunch of garbage.
All right, so we have 5 reports from the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, one of which I'm particularly excited about.
Ooh, shots fired at the other 4.
I mean, well, you're not.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, accurate. Yes. So why don't you start us off, Daryl Grove?
Okay, so
not David Singletary.
Mason Cruz is scouting Marco Farfan, the 18-year-old American defender for the Portland Timbers. Mason says that Farfan has been playing for T2, parentheses, who are terrible, and appearing on the bench for the Timbers. Mason's parentheses, not mine. He got a few minutes against Chicago this past weekend. It made a positive offensive impact and even crossed a ball in to Fernando Adi, who scored, but the goal was disallowed due to a foul.
But well done to Marco Farfan for getting some time. Well done to Alex C. Brew for sending in another report about Davy Selke, the 22-year-old German striker for Hertha Berlin.
Oh, has he moved?
He has. I think he was another one where the move was agreed a while ago, but it only went through recently because the window opens in July. But I remembered it because he went there like a week after John Brooks left Hertha. And at the time I was like, oh, it's good. He's moving to another club. They're not going to... Oh, they brought somebody in. Oh, boy. That's a really good player. Oh, boy.
So, the report on Davy Selke is, Taylor.
That Selke finished the U21 Euros with 2 goals and played in 6 of Germany's 7 games. He missed the final against Spain due to injury, but should be good for the start of preseason with Hertha.
So he is now a European U21 champion. All right. The last generation that did that turned out to be quite good for Germany.
Yeah, not too bad. And I think Alec also added that it seems like maybe Selke will make the step up, but we shall see.
Okay. Russell Varner is scouting Hugo Ariano, the 19-year-old American defender for the LA Galaxy. Russell says Hugo started and played the full match in LA's 2-1 loss to San Jose last weekend, the Cali Clasico, I believe they call that. Russell says Ariano looked good and will likely retain his spot in the starting 11, ... especially since Joe Van Dam got a red card against San Jose.
Shock of all shocks. Jay Glenn scouting Ruben Neves, the 20-year-old Portuguese midfielder, for, I'm going to say, question mark.
Question mark. That's my favourite team.
Right? Neves played 3 games for Portugal at the U21 Euros and is now heavily linked with a move to Wolverhampton. If that move does go through, it will be a big one. He will be 20 when the season starts, but has already played in 2 Champions League campaigns and was Porto's captain on several different occasions last season. Jay adds that the championship is probably a good level for Neves, though. There's been a lot of speculation about why you would leave playing for one of Portugal's top teams to go to a second team in England. But his point was that basically if you get rid of Benfica and Sporting, the Portuguese Liga is probably comparable to the championship, and there's way less pressure and scrutiny on a young Portuguese player there.
All right, so I'm biased. Obviously, as a Wolves fan, I want this move to happen. I want a scouting network player. I want a really good, promising Portuguese player to come and play for Wolves. But I think I agree with Jay that it's better than going to a big English team in the Premier League and sort of having a rough start and then you're written off and nobody thinks you're any good. It's maybe better to under the radar establish yourself, be a star in the Championship, get used to the pace of the game, then get that move up. The only thing that worries me is that means Wolves lose him.
Yes, but if they do lose him, they're going to lose him for a decent sum of money.
That would be
my
true.
guess.
Yeah. But this is maybe the George Mendes wisdom almost, counselling him into a good career move.
Yeah. And yet you don't like George, and you don't like his connections to your club.
Let's see how this pans out, because this move was sort of seemed to be happening at least 4 days ago, right? And it's for some reason got stuck somewhere, right? It's not that far from Portugal to England.
Nope.
There's no
he went the wrong
reason.
way. He went across Asia and then around the Pacific and then back around. He took a very circuitous route to get there.
I'm just still a little scared or worried or concerned.
Listeners, Daryl's fingers are both crossed right now.
They are
literally crossed. It's amazing.
They are using Wolves as a sort of bit of leverage.
No, they would never do that.
Other teams.
That never happens every time that there's a player in there.
Year, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just worried that may be what's happening. That may be the cause of the delay, because the delay happened over July 4th. They don't celebrate July 4th in England. There was no reason for it to not happen around that time.
American owners?
No.
Do they have American owners?
Chinese.
Big respect for America? Who knows?
There is a McDonald's in Wolverhampton.
There we go.
Maybe.
That's definitely what it was. But yeah, so we shall see. We'll see if he gets linked with other clubs, if maybe it is a way of trying to get some money from some other clubs, or if he just ends up in Turkey or China.
Yep. Okay, not to put too much pressure on it, but the result of this move will determine forever how I feel about this George Mendes thing. If this goes through, I will begin to turn back towards thinking, okay, maybe this is a weird way of running a team, but actually kind of exciting. But if it is that he ends up at a different team and Wolves will just use as leverage the whole time, I'm going to be all in on the anti-George Mendes bus.
At this point, I'm reminded of the words of Tiny Tim from Futurama. I think it was Tiny Tim from Futurama.
Yeah, that's where the character originates.
It's the robot Tiny Tim. You raised my hopes and then dashed them quite expertly. I feel like that's what George Mendes specializes in.
Right, but if he's going to do that to me every summer, then I don't see why I should be friends with him.
You should probably also learn how to pronounce his name. We've talked about Portuguese pronunciation before. If it's Ruben Neves, I'm pretty sure it's George Mendes.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Maybe that's what's been holding all these moves back. So now that we've done it, we'll see if this move happens tomorrow.
People are calling Wolves and saying, "Can I speak to George Mendes?" No, they're probably saying Jorge Mendes.
Yeah, that's definitely what's happening.
And someone's saying, no one by that name.
Although, knowing England, it's probably Georgie Mendes is what seems more likely to me. Final report comes from Alex Forbes, scouting Reggie Cannon, the 19-year-old American right-back for FC Dallas.
Good week for American fullbacks, right? Farfan and Cannon. That could be the future of American fullbacks. Gold Cup 2020-something.
No hype train here. No hype train here, Daryl. After patiently riding the bench for FC Dallas's first 16 games, our young Padawan, says Alex, finally received his first start in a 2-1 win against the Tulsa Roughnecks in the 4th round of the US Open Cup. Cannon was a constant threat down the right flank, placing low, dangerous crosses into the box. Following his debut, Cannon again received the start in FC Dallas's 3-1 win against the Colorado Rapids. This time, Reggie's hard work paid off, and he notched his first professional assist after beating his man to an incisive Mauro Diaz pass near the end line and finding teammate Ryan Hollingshead at the far post to break the 1-1 stalemate.
All right.
Did you hear the key thing in there that made me very excited? Aside from this young American player doing big things, whose pass did he receive, Daryl Grove?
Mauro Diaz. He's back?
Apparently. I did not know that until I read this report. Mauro Diaz may be back from that ACL surgery and back in the swing of things with FC Dallas.
Happy days are here again. All right. Oh, speaking of happy days in Major League Soccer, I don't believe we got a scouting report about it, but that's okay because the big news is choo, the Tommy train is in effect. Tommy Thompson has scored his first Major League Soccer goal.
I can't wait for you to meet Tommy Thompson and just, like, geek out the way, not geek out, but react the way, like, a young woman in the 1960s might have reacted to meeting the Beatles. Like, I've loved you forever. Like, that's how you're going to deal with Tommy Thompson, and I'm excited about it.
I'm going to challenge him to a freestyle competition.
Oh, boy. Prepare to lose that horrifically. We already talked about your back heel skills, Daryl.
Tommy Thompson scored in the second minute for San Jose. They ended up losing 4-2 to Atlanta, but it almost doesn't matter because Tommy Thompson is finally off the mark, has himself a Major League Soccer goal.
He does. So congratulations to Tommy Thompson, and thank you to everyone who sent in scouting reports. We always appreciate it.
But mostly Tommy Thompson this week. Right?
Obviously.
Yeah, thank you to Mason, to Alec, to Russell, to Jay, and to Alex. If you'd like to join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network, go to totalsoccershow.com/subscribe. I see Taylor Googling something over there. What you got for me?
I'm Googling to make sure that Mauro Diaz is back because I feel like we should have known this, and I'm a little bit surprised. I also want to add that I love us, Daryl Grove, because before we started recording, I believe it was you who, once again, every time you say it, said, this could be like a nice quick show. We are at minute 50 at time of recording, at time of stating this. So, yes.
Are you done Googling so we can make it under an hour?
Let's go.
Is Mauro Diaz back?
Yes, very much so, it turns out. It looks like he actually came back. He subbed on in late May. He came back in like the 81st minute of that one. He started at least their last 3 games. Admittedly, we haven't been paying as much attention to Major League Soccer, but with vacations and national team competitions. I will add that in those last 3 games, FC Dallas, I believe, have won all 3 and scored 10 goals. So maybe not surprising given that he's back in that lineup.
So he's just as important as we thought, right?
Yeah.
Him and Reggie Cannon.
Yeah, obviously. Equally important.
Actually, here's a good thing we could do is I think the Gold Cup break, because MLS takes a break for the Gold Cup, marks basically the halfway point of the MLS season. So we could pick up with MLS for the start of the second half of the season.
Yeah.
Like what's happened so far and what's happening next.
I like that plan.
Yeah.
So it'll help us keep track of what's going on in Major League Soccer. But if only there were a way to keep track of what's going on with young players and youth development and college soccer and all that good stuff in the United States.
So, yes, you may have noticed on Twitter, we've been working on this for a little while now, talking behind the scenes. But Will Parchman finally announced it on Twitter for us that there is going to be a Top Draw Soccer show, the Top Draw Soccer show. And it's going to be Taylor and I partnered with Will Parchman and Travis Clark. And we are going to put out a podcast once a week for Top Draw Soccer, and it's going to be all about examining American soccer. I think we're going to call it examining the underbelly of American soccer.
I like it.
So that means college and youth player development, U20s, U17s, homegrown players, and what happens even beyond that, all the way up to the US national team. So if you want to know about things like pay to play, issues like that, that's what we're going to talk about on the Top Draw Soccer podcast. It's not yet published, but it's coming soon.
There we are. Nice tease, Daryl Grove.
Yeah, think of it like the posters that you see outside the movie theatre that just says coming soon with a little teaser poster.
I think we're familiar with posters.
Just an alien head. Bursting out of Will Parchman's chest.
There it is. Okay, I wasn't sure which alien film you were going with. Can I add a thing about aliens? Whatever, time is no matter at this point. So, I recently started watching the first Independence Day. As you know, I love that film. So then I wanted to watch more Independence Day. How dare you shake your head? The only thing that was available, Independence Day 2, which I had heard was an abomination. And amongst all of the terrible things in that movie, I have to say the number one thing that really bothered me is that they had not named the alien species in the movie. Like, if an alien species came and invaded the world, we would call them the bugs or something. That's what they do in Starship Troopers. But we would have a name for the aliens. That they still just call them, those aren't the ones that came at us before. That you wouldn't call them the ones. Like, you would have absolutely the exoskeletons or something. Come on, people.
It's almost as if the original Independence Day wasn't as good as you thought it was when you were 14 years old.
Wrong. But it's almost as though Roland Emmerich, when he said he was writing this script for 20 years, the thing that kept resonating or kind of ringing out of my head is when I had an entire semester to write a term paper, and when I had to have those weekly meetings with the teacher, I was like, oh yeah, working on it. Great books. Yeah, doing lots of research. And then the night before, I was like, oh no, I have built this up. I'm in trouble. And that's what it feels like Roland Emmerich did with that film.
Yep. Agreed. I haven't seen it, but agreed.
Oh, it's awesome. It's so good.
All right, on that
Do you
note,
like bleeding from the eyes? Because if so, that's a way to go.
On that note, thank you, Taylor Rockwell, for talking to me today about how FIFA rankings work, USA v Panama preview, and what's wrong with Independence Day.
I mean, what's wrong is a long list, but one of the things that is most wrong, there we are. And you're welcome.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We will be back after the USA-Panama game with our quick take update and then with our full review.